Cut to be Wastelanders, welcome back to the Lost Holotapes channel, where we delve into the historical lore of the Fallout Wasteland. Today we'll explore the lore of the intriguing Salt Lake Stories mod, introducing the exposition of the Great Salt Lake. The region in northern Utah holds significant importance in the global Fallout history, but has never been detailed until the release of this mod. Let's celebrate another achievement of the channel with a like, subscribe or comment. As always, with the episode released, I've updated the map and added lore to my lore compendium. Links are in the description. If you're new to the channel, I recommend starting with the first episode, as the narrative is sequential. Stock up on Nuka-Cola and buckle up, we are venturing into the white salty sands. But of course, before delving into the lore, let's say a few words about the mod itself. The Salt Lake Stories mod was created by modders Usarian22 and Radioactive Man in 2018. As of the end of 2023, it has about 1,500 endorsements and nearly 8% conversion. This mod has a unique structure. Instead of the usual open world, we get about 15 mini-world spaces on a hypothetical regional map that the player can visit. Essentially, the mod brings the spirit of classic Fallout into the Bethesda world model, which sounds interesting and has been successfully implemented in practice. You can travel on the map by car, which needs refueling, maintenance, and its trunk can be used for storage of empty beer cans. Of course, this system is built on crutches, so due to camera behavior peculiarities, moving on the map looks quite strange. But it is what it is. Of course, the region of the Great Salt Lake cannot exist without the reference to Mad Max, and players have the opportunity to acquire the legendary Interceptor. Another feature is the absence of a main storyline as such. Essentially, quests focus on local settlement problems, so we won't need a courier as a protagonist, and we won't have to rack our brains thinking about the region's future. However, no mod is without its problems. The biggest issue with this mod is that it's unfinished. The main mod creator burned out before completing work on crucial locations, such as ruins of New Canaan, Salt Lake City, Wendover and Twin Falls. It's very sad, as he didn't even have time to write a script for them that could be included at the design document level. I have a faint hope that someday Usarian will decide to close the gestalt, but most likely not all white spots are destined to be filled. Some of the lore that falls within this Wasteland's territory was introduced in Van Buren and Fallout New Vegas, so we'll touch on that too, to stay focused and not to lose the narrative thread. Let's talk a bit about the mod's geography. Specifically because of this mod, I've designated the northern part of Utah as a separate wasteland. The game map covers the entire square area and includes the territory of the Great Salt Lake, the Bonneville Flats Desert to the west of it, and part of the Idaho Plains. Over time, and due to an unspecified event, the Salt Lake City area will turn into a radioactive zone covered with the red mist called Toxicton, which obviously was planned as a reintroduction of Sierra Madre environment. Generally, this is how we can differentiate these subregions. We'll traditionally start exploring the history of the area with Vault-Tec vaults. Vault 28 is located in Provo. The vaults experiment involved populating it with young people aged 20 to 30. According to the lore of Fallout New California, it was designated as Vault 32, but 32 will be used in this series, so we'll use Vault 28 as the closest available. In Salt Lake City, there's Vault 70. Even before the war, all spots in the vault were bought out by Mormons, although the experiment might have partially involved this. To the east of Salt Lake, there's Vault 71, which by 2281 has long been abandoned. It's unclear what the experiment involved, but judging by the presence of a couple of dozen robo-brains, Vault 71 must have been a partial residence for them. One might think that the experiment completely duplicates Vault 108, but as you may recall, there was a completely different experiment there, and the robo-braining was an initiative of one of the survivors. It is not the Salt Lake region, but for the context, to the east of Salt Lake in Green River, Wyoming, there was an unnumbered vault. Apart from the absence of a number, nothing in the vault was marked, and it was like a labyrinth. The experiment aimed to develop the intelligence of the inhabitants, so the leisure of the vault dwellers consisted of solving various mathematical problems and other mundane activities. South of Twin Falls, there was a pre-war bunker of Chinese People's Army, known as Cell 47. The main operation was socialist propaganda in small local towns. As often happens in Fallout during the war, Asian partisans turned into ghouls. Perhaps they had some genetic predisposition to this. In the mountains of western Utah, disguised as an old mine, the biolaboratory Tango Sierra operated. It was a relatively small complex involving creating a substance that could completely purify radiation in water bodies. For some reason they called it a virus, probably because they envied the colleagues from West Tech working on more interesting projects. After 2077, the general, formerly the head of the Tango Sierra laboratory, obsessed with the idea of eternal war, much like the Enclave in Appalachia, made scientists' lives unbearable. Essentially, he took the scientific staff hostage, forcing them to continue experiments and nervously suspecting them of collaboration with the Chinese. The head of the scientists, Dr. Kruger, understood that this couldn't last long and staged a rebellion, during which two loyal soldiers of the general died and part of the tunnel leading to the surface collapsed. The scientists managed to leave the laboratory, but the trapped general eventually shot himself. The scientists on the surface didn't go far and settled directly in the mountains on Clow Peak. Perhaps they were afraid of the high radiation levels in the cities. They were also very lucky that where they settled there was an ideally clean stream. However, it wasn't a coincidence. The stream was clean because the scientists did manage to create that virus in the laboratory, all samples of which they accidentally lost during testing, and which ended up in the underground waters. It was just like in Pirates of Dark Water, when Ren put the treasures of Octopon into the water, purifying it from the corruption. Press like if you got the reference. The settlement of scientists eventually degrades to the state of a tribe. Unfortunately, in the mod it will be called simply by the name of the modern-day leader Arkas, rather than having a special name. So we have no choice but to call it Arkas tribe. What I really like in the mod is that the author even came up with its pagan mythology. At least unlike many other tribes, theirs is somewhat developed. In particular, the tribe believed in the existence of an evil spirit called Unas, taking the form of a monster attacking the tribe. This monster was actually a rare deathclaw that wandered onto the mountain. Above Tango Sierra was a radio tower, and the tribe thought it was the tree with which their ancestors could communicate with brothers and sisters in distant lands, and which burned in the Great Fire. After the war, several tribes formed in Utah. In the town of Spanish Fork, an aggressive tribe called the White Legs appeared, painting themselves white to blend in with the sands of the Great Salt Lake. April of 2078. In Vault 70, the jumpsuit production machine breaks. I'm not an expert on Mormonism, but something tells me that exposing fatty bodies doesn't quite go along with their tradition of chastity, although on the other hand, they produce children at the speed of an assembly line, so I don't know. By 2140, a hunting settlement of Wendover appears on the site of the eponymous Brewer City, first mentioned in the lore of Fallout of Nevada. I never cease to be amazed by the division of territorial boundaries in the USA. Wendover is divided into two parts, and the state border runs through the parking lot of a hotel casino. The explanation is simple. Casinos are prohibited in Utah, but in Nevada, you're welcome to open one. 2190. Vault 70 opens and the Mormons found the city of New Jerusalem on the ruins of Salt Lake City. The inhabitants of New Jerusalem decided not to have any trade or connections with tribes, raiders, and other wasteland dwellers, so they completely isolated themselves. 2233. Tribes, raiders, and other wasteland inhabitants, resentful of New Jerusalem, besieged the city and managed to storm it to plunder. They massacred anyone who didn't escape in time. Fortunately, the majority of the inhabitants, led by the prophet Judah Black, still managed to evacuate to the north in the ruins of Ogden, where they founded a new city, New Canaan, which over the years will become the largest and most important settlement in the entire Utah wasteland. Eventually it will be able to form an alliance with the NCR and establish regular trade. According to Van Buren's concept, they were supposed to build the city by 2235, but it seems quite strange that they would just wander around for 2 years until someone suggested the idea of finally getting a roof over their heads. Therefore, we'll consider the founding year of New Canaan as 2233. In an episode dedicated to Van Buren, we discussed the history of the reservation. Just a reminder that due to heartless tortures of prisoners and experiments on ghoul reproduction, a schism occurred among the children of the Wasteland, and a group of ghouls led by brothers Mikey and Kenny Green led the reservation around 2251. They headed north to Utah, where they founded the ghoul settlement of Mikey's Motors, protected on 3 sides by mountains. The settlement's economy relied heavily on Kenny's mechanical skills. He started restoring and selling pre-war cars, providing a means of transportation across the Salt Desert. Of course, the only one who could service the cars was Kenny himself. Approximately 25 years before the events of the mod, Denton Clark founded the caravan company West Trek. One of the company's main products was its own brand of jerky called Jimmy Jerky. Denton has a son named Jimmy, and one might think he named the brand after his son, but no, he named it after his dog, and he named his son after the dog as well. According to one of the maps found in the game, Westrek traded with cities from the Graveyard to Klamath on the west coast. At least 20 years before the fall of New Canaan, Green River Vault opened and started accepting Wastelanders to ensure the diversity of their gene pool. Before being allowed settlement, potential candidates had to prove their high level of intelligence. Molly Callahan and her mother came and settled in the shelter. After a few years, at some point, Molly left the shelter and moved to New Canaan. Before 2271, in the vicinity of the Great Salt Lake, the 80s appeared, raiders who became the main scourge of northern Utah. This group used motorcycles as their primary means of transportation, allowing them to cover vast distances in their raids. Most likely much earlier, but definitely before 2272, the settlement of Twin Falls is established on the site of the eponymous river city in Idaho. Twin Falls fell victim to the teachings spread by ghouls from Cell 47, completely embracing communist ideology. The city's residents have no personal property or money, everything belongs to the community. But at least, everybody's occupied there. Also before 2272, the settlement of Bowietown appears on the site of the pre-war settlement of Montello. It was founded by the West Trek Company and Mr. Bowie, who modestly named the settlement after himself. Due to the fact that the headquarters of the Caravaneers is located in the city, it became the main trading hub in the region. Salt Lake is a very challenging region for survival, and kilometers of white sand stretched between settlements. The harsh condition forced local settlements to unite. Thus, in 2273, Salt Lake Trading Union was founded, including Mikey's Motors, Wendover, Twin Falls, Bowietown, and New Canaan. Settlements organized trade between each other by repairing the old railway, and Kenny from Mikey's Motors built a couple of trains running between settlements. Kenny is the main driver of Mikey's Motors' economy, which sounds ironic. Twin Falls' main export is clean water, which they obtain from springs. Bowietown is the main supplier of food and other goods and services, including banking and entertainment. They sometimes buy weapons from the gun runners. The fact that the gun runners are expanding their business well beyond the NCR territory will also be revealed in the mod series Tales from New Reno. Over the years, Wendover transformed from hunting grounds into another drug and alcohol den, where lawlessness prevails. Nevertheless, it played some role in the Union. Twin Falls is the most remote settlement from the rest of the Union. Moreover, due to the mountains between it and Bowietown, the railroad was not laid before the war. The construction of a railroad to Twin Falls becomes one of the most important infrastructure projects after the makeshift trains, and quite likely it will take not just 1 year or even a decade. However, time is not a problem for ghouls. To make trade with Twin Falls easier, at least with the old-fashioned Brahmin way, Westrek established the outpost Arid Creek at the site of a dried-up stream halfway to Twin Falls, primarily serving as a stop and resting place for caravaneers. Westrek had no idea about the nearby ghoul communist cell. Their bunker was located under a semi-destroyed house just 100 meters from the outpost. The Chinese didn't stop trying to infect America with the red, supervising Twin Falls and recruiting people from it. At least since 2278 they conducted various operations to spread communist ideology. The presence of a caravan outpost made this task easier. Between 2278 and 2280 they lost 4 agents. Before 2280, some incident occurred within the ruins of Salt Lake City, resulting in the city being enveloped in red mist, where disfigured and dangerous mutants lurked. Anyone who ventured there never returned. The area is now called Toxington. The story goes that Bishop Mordecai, the leader of New Canaan, went on an expedition to Toxington a few years ago to visit the ruins of the once fallen settlement of the Mormon New Jerusalem. However, as expected, only a handful of pilgrims returned from the entire expedition, and they never spoke of what they saw there. In 2280, the destruction of New Canaan occurs. The canonical year in theory is 2281, but Fallout New Vegas developers crammed so many consecutive events into 2281 that it loses any logic. According to the canon, the destruction of New Canaan, the Divide, the Battle for Hoover Dam, the War in Zion, Sierra Madre and the Frontier War all happened in late 2281 within a couple of months. When Doug Mitchell patched up the Courier's third eye, the year hadn't even ended. The situation is similar to Fallout 76 with its perpetual 2103. Between these events, Some time and intermediate events should have occurred. Ulysses needed time to fight in New Canaan, desert, settle in Ashton, survive the explosion, move to Mojave, build his ranch, join Mojave Express, and find the courier. The Mormons should have come to Zion, the Whitelegs should have followed. The courier must have recovered from the explosion in Ashton, returned to San Francisco for the Platinum ship, and headed to the Mojave. Tasha Weaver should not only have reached the frontier, but also established a faction, and Caesar just before the Second Battle of Hoover Dam shouldn't be occupied with Joshua Graham and New Canaan at all. In the Holotapes narrative, I will alter a timeline a little bit and accept that the events in New Canaan occurred in 2280, the divide in early 2281, and the Second Battle for Hoover Dam in August 2282. The last statement will be confirmed by some other sources, by the way. I hope such adjustments to dates for a smoother and more measured story will be deemed appropriate. So, Caesar was not willing to accept that Joshua Graham survived the Grand Canyon. For him, it was almost a personal insult. He found out that Joshua was hiding in New Canaan and sent his frumentary, Ulysses, the last representative of the Twisted Hairs, to the Whitelegs tribe at the Great Salt Lake. The Whitelegs wanted to join the Legion, but Caesar needed proof of their loyalty and reliability. Ulysses had to prepare the tribe, teach them tactics, handle new weapons, Roman art of war, and as a graduation exam, they had to destroy New Canaan for helping Graham, and of course, Graham himself. Under the cover of night during a shift change, the Whitelegs attacked the city and destroyed it. Women, children, the elderly, always slaughtered by the savages as far as they could reach. Preachers were burned in their own churches. They covered all the land around with salt, making it barren, so that no one could settle in the area. However, not all Mormons faced a tragic fate. Joshua Graham, with a small group of survivors, managed to evade Caesar's fatal blow once again and evacuate to Zion Canyon, where they dispersed among the Sorrows and Dead Horses tribes. Following them were the Whitelegs, for whom killing Graham became a matter of survival, as Caesar clearly would not tolerate their failure. The Whitelegs founded the Camp 3 Marys. In addition to Graham, Tasha Weaver, a former Brotherhood of Steel paladin who left the organization after Operation Sunburst, also survived. A group of Mormons, partially consisting of her former comrades from the Brotherhood, survived with her. Most likely they were not in the city at that moment, or they would have resisted the invaders. Losing her home, Tasha converted her group into the Crusaders of Steel and decided that their goal was to purify the land from sinners with fire and sword. She wanted to start with General Blackthorn, who defeated her while fighting for the NCR at Helios 1. Learning that he deserted towards Portland, she went after him. She was joined by Moldy Callahan, Charlene Young, the Castellan Clements. These characters will play a crucial role in Fallout Frontier's story. Beside them, Tasha was joined by Morgana Akalan, another paladin from Mojave trying to join the Shattered Brotherhood. Traders gave Morgana a lead on Tasha Weaver's group, not seeing the difference between them and the original Brotherhood. When Morgana intercepted the Crusaders, she was stunned seeing what the faction that had renounced the code and principles of the Order had turned into. After the victory over the Mormons, Whitelegs came to admire Ulysses even more. To demonstrate their love for him, they began to braid their hair similarly to how he wore his. However, instead of joy, the hairstyle, devoid of any profound meaning, triggered a fit of anger and reflection in Ulysses about what he was doing in his life. Disappointed in realizing that he destroyed New Canaan, similar to how Caesar once destroyed his own tribe, Ulysses deserted from the Legion and moved to Ashton. The destruction of New Canaan severely undermined the Salt Lake Trade Union and forced the remaining settlements to sign a mutual defense agreement in case of attacks by raiders and invaders. East of Toxicton, in the swamps, a commune of hermit women called Lost Valley emerges, living with the supermutant near Vault 71. While they don't have a rich backstory, some rescued female characters can be sent to live there during the quests. In Bowietown, alongside Westrek, the caravan business is practiced by the family of caravaneer Harcourt Fenton Mudd. Harcourt is a hardened wastelander who once was a paladin in the Brotherhood of Steel Midwest. Gul Pepov from Gecko City confirms the theory that the NCR, after the events of Fallout 2, annexed Gecko along with Vault City. The raider tribe of 80s is known from Fallout New Vegas, but their locations were never mentioned. This mod finally introduces a settlement for them. They are based at Room Rock, in the southwest of the region. The leader of the 80s is Todd the Toddler, a deranged psychopath who during a raid played with the corpses of children like dolls, earning his nickname. To become the faction leader, he just traditionally killed the previous leader. Promontory Point houses the Carter Ranch. Old Man Carter is a nasty gruff old man of undetermined age, and everyone in his family can't wait for him to kick the bucket, although he's one of those who might outlive them all. He slings mud at everyone he comes into contact with, especially all his descendants, even though it's thanks to them that the ranch still functions. One of his still living sons in particular supplies the region with moonshine, and if the shipments are delayed, everyone understands that Old Man Carter has taken up the belt again. I think the ranch should be part of the Union. During quests, the player would have to clear the area of ants and rescue slaves in his kitchen, sending them to Lost Valley. It turns out that fan-made story mods often include lore elements that are poorly developed. This mostly happens to raider groups or other conditional factions. Unfortunately, I can't find a place for factions in the Holotapes narrative that are not connected to other formations or the plot, and there is nothing to say about them except that they existed. In the Salt Lake Stories mod, I find such a faction, a group of children living in a tent camp in the woods near Bowietown, supposedly hunting and selling a game to the town, calling themselves the Butters Gang, named after their leader. Factions consisting solely of children are a bad concept in general, and only Little Lamplight from Fallout 3 had some working justification for its existence. 2281, Legion Scouts establish a camp in Crow Canyon, from where they begin sending their secret agents to settlements, which is their traditional strategy for invading new territories. 3 months before the events of the mod, the Mud Caravaneers attempted to open a new route to Twin Falls through the mountains near Claw Peak, but raiders, likely the 80s, attacked them. The local Arkas tribe saved them and even allowed them to stop to tend their wounds. However, as soon as the wounded got on their feet, they were promptly asked to leave the village. Nonetheless, Mud Sr. noticed a stream with crystal clear spring water, sparkling an idea to get rich with its help. Using pre-war documentation, he learned about the existence of the Sierra Tango complex, and perhaps his colleagues from the Brotherhood of Steel even helped him. In the Midwest, they knew how to deal with Deathclaws, so Mud had an egg he grabbed when leaving the organization. He trained the hatched reptile like a dog. The mod's events take place right after the events in Zion Canyon, as the Whitelegs have returned to northern Utah and whose battered appearance brought a sense of satisfaction to the region's residents. Therefore, let's assume the time period of the gameplay is somewhere between January and August 2282. Twin Falls has significant grievances against Mr. Bowie for being the embodiment of capitalism and stealing their books about communism. He probably didn't personally go to Twin Falls, perhaps the books were intercepted in caravans. However, the communists didn't take this lightly, and agents stole the books back from Mr. Bowie, and then kidnapped Mr. Bowie himself, hoping to perform neurosurgery on his brain and control him like a puppet. It's challenging to say whether they succeeded, as this specific quest seems to be unfinished. So, you shall accept what satisfies your own ideology. Twin Falls not only had problems with Mr. Bowie, Raider Marty Fly attacked the bank in Twin Falls, killing 3 and stealing the town's caps. A reward was set for his head, and since the settlements are in an alliance, scum like him has nowhere to run except to join the 80s. Bowietown was interested in personally capturing Marty to improve relations with Twin Falls. There were even more hardened criminals in the region. One of them, the cannibal Biter, spread terror amongst settlements as a serial killer, leaving characteristic bite marks on the bodies of victims. He held some women hostage in an abandoned military base where he tortured them. I wonder if he was inspired by the character Jaws from James Bond movies. As part of completing quests, the player had to find and eliminate him, and then find the base where he kept his captives, which could be sent to Lost Valley. Sometime before the events of the game, Harcourt released his Deathclaw in the vicinity of a tribal village, hoping it would drive them away from the inhabited area, allowing Mud to privatize the stream. The appearance of the Deathclaw caused great concern among the tribals, as several warriors and gatherers went missing. They believed it was Unas, according to their mythology. In reality, Unas, the Deathclaw, was only responsible for 1 death, while others were killed by Mirelurks and ants and abducted by the 80s, intending to make them fight in a cage for their amusement. Nonetheless, the tribe was in panic. An adventuring group led by Mephisto, which had some dealings with the Muds, stole the map with coordinates of the coveted treasure from Harcourt's house, significantly disrupting their plans. Now, Mudd and his sons needed to outmaneuver their competitors, so they went back to Claw Peak to monitor the situation and try to be the first to find the complex where virus samples might still exist. They didn't inform Bowietown where they were going, and their disappearance created panic in the settlement. Unable to explain to the tribe why they returned to the mountain, they were denied passage. Mephisto's group of 3 managed to infiltrate the area, finding the bunker. In theory, the courier joined them, but will conditionally exclude him from the narrative. In the laboratory, Mephisto finds reports indicating that the place no longer holds any value. In the tunnels connecting the surface to the lab, Una slept, so delighted that dinner had come to him, the Deathclaw attacked the group. They managed to fend it off. Upon surfacing, Mephisto's group got involved in the conflict between the Mods and the tribe. Harcourt, having lost his Deathclaw, took the chief's daughter hostage, demanding the tribe to leave the territory. Learning from Mephisto that no virus samples were preserved and realizing the futility of capturing the source, since the cost of transporting water wouldn't pay off, especially when Twin Falls can supply more and cheaper water, the Mods released the hostage and returned to Bowietown. 80s have been attacking caravans more frequently lately and somehow accurately determining which caravans are worth their time and effort. Settlements grew suspicious of an informant's presence. Westrek sent an empty decoy caravan to Arid Creek, which was predictably attacked by the motorcycle gang. Although the caravaneers managed to fend them off, they were surprised to find out, firstly, the raiders knew about the decoy, and secondly, they were dressed in NCR gear. Putting 2 and 2 together, they understood that the Legion was supplying the 80s with captured NCR equipment. Presumably, they planned to include them in their ranks later. Westrek initiated an internal investigation, but couldn't find anyone from the limited circle who knew about the decoy. Then they started checking their communication channels and found a bug planted in Mikey's radio station. Trying to find the Legion agent, Mikey spread false information that they identified him and were coming to arrest him. The medic in the settlement panicked and tried to escape without even putting on a shirt. It was precisely his behavior that determined who to shoot in the back. After digging through his records, the ghouls discovered the existence of the Legion camp in Crow Canyon. During reconnaissance, the ghouls found a poorly guarded water supply warehouse. Instead of straightforwardly attacking a militarily superior enemy, they showed ingenuity and poisoned their water. Within a couple of days, the Legion camp was wiped out. Despite losing the camp, the Legion's higher-ups might appreciate the aesthetics of this method of elimination. Despite all the grievances, the Union wants to include the 80s in the system, as they have strength and transportation. They could become a rapid response force in exchange for benefits and trade connections. The leader of the 80s, the Toddler, resisted, but his deputy, Cat, who had de facto been leading the faction for some time since Toddler was an inept administrator, still considers joining the Union. Being a principal thug is okay, of course, but how long would such a group last? She kills Toddler, who didn't expect such betrayal, but who could have expected this, right? She agrees to the deal on the condition that the Union clears the mines on the mountain of the Venamingos, so raiders don't risk their lives. Additionally, after setting up equipment, the Union would buy ore from them, supply them with weapons and provisions. An additional condition is to let them deal with Whitelegs themselves. They wanted to further humiliate them by sending them to mine ore in the mines. It would be interesting to know where 80's hatred for Whitelegs comes from. On their part, they committed to guarding caravans from dangers. It is quite possible that the rupture of relations with the Legion and entry into the Union was influenced by the fall of the Legion camp in Crow Canyon. With this, we conclude our exploration of the Salt Lake Stories mod. I would really like to someday create a reissue of this video, supplementing it with lore about unfinished locations, but only time will tell if I get such a chance. I hope even in this form you enjoyed this story of Salt Lake. If so, please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave comments and all that stuff. Don't let your gas run out while crossing the desert, and then we'll meet again in the Wastelands, Wanderers. End of the holotape.